Hey, today I thought I would bring up something from the Bronze Age. It's a thing that I really enjoyed back then, and it, to me, just really kind of, encapsulates the Bronze Age and just the fun it was for me back then. And it's my collection of Marvel Treasury Editions. So this is the first one I ever got. It's a Fantastic Four, and you can see they even had numbers on them too. The first one is Spider-Man, and it's a great one, and I don't have that one, and I always wanted it. It's just a great all red cover background. Some of the editions are signed by John Romita and Stan Lee. I never got that one, but I'll probably get it at some point. One thing that I noticed when I went through these before the video here is I didn't buy any of these. These were all given to me as gifts, either for Christmas, birthdays, or end of the year if you did good in school. So it's kind of funny to me. I never bought these. And my guess would be because of the price tag when you're a kid. But here's my next one, Hulk, number 5. These are great books. They're all reprints, and they're all humongous. They have great art on the back of them too, original art. So that's the back of the Fantastic Four, and this is the back of the Hulk. Great transformation. But like I was saying, the price is $1.50. So these mostly started in 1974, 75, 76. So back then, for $1 you could get anywhere between 5 to 4 comics for $1. So to buy one of these for $1.50 meant I wouldn't be able to get 6 comic books. So that's probably it. But I think the larger part was I don't remember seeing these in drugstores and even comic shops, really. The only place I saw them, there was a place, local shop near me. It was called Worldwide News, and it had every newspaper from everywhere in the world. It had Life magazine, all that kind of stuff. And these were always in there. There was a little shop up on a road that we seldom went to. It was a very popular street, but for whatever reason we just never ventured that far south. But they were there, and I think that's where my dad or my mom got them most of the time. But the next one is my favorite of all my treasuries, even better than Captain America. And you can tell by how much it's been loved. It came out in 1976, it's number 9, and it's this one. And it is just, I love this one. It's classic reprints. You can see all the fights. You have Thor and Hulk, Daredevil, Captain America, The Thing and Submariner, and Spider-Man and Silver Surfer. And I'll do in a little bit here. I'll show some interiors of these things, but I just love these big books. And I haven't tried to, but maybe I will collect them. I have all my originals here, but we'll see. I don't know. I haven't even checked price-wise how much they are or what they're going for. Then there's Thor. This is number 10, and it's pretty awesome. Battling Ulick the Troll, and then you got on the back. Most of the backs have pretty cool original art on them. And then the other thing that was great about these is you used to get these at Christmas. They were very clever about when they put these out. This one's from 1976, and I can remember me and my brother, we got this thing, and we just poured over it that whole day. Usually you open your presents in the morning, and then you had that lull period between when you had to go get your scratchy church clothes on and go to your grandma's house. So usually we played with our toys, and for us, we would go through and read these things, and it was just big fun because a lot of this stuff back then, again, you really didn't have access to this unless you bought the original issue. And to go out as a kid and buy, Journey into Mystery 112 or something like that to see some original fight, or Submariner number 8, it just was an impossibility. One, you couldn't find those books back then because there was no eBay just to click on and have delivered to your door. You actually had to go and hunt for these things. But again, it's got a great back to it. And the other thing they did is there was reprints, but then there was like pin-up pages and things like that. And again, I'll show some interiors, but they would show like snowball fights and silly stuff like that. So it was pretty cool. And they continued on into the years. I think they did these all the way through the middle 80s. But here's this one's number 21. It's Fantastic Four. Pretty great stuff. And I believe this one deals with Galactus and the Silver Surfer and all that stuff. There's some other really neat stuff in here, like an interior of the Baxter Building, which I loved when I was a kid. I remember obsessing about the back cover. And then as you can tell, this is getting modern. You can just tell by the artwork on it. You know, these are modern covers. They started doing that route. Instead of just reprinting the originals, they would draw modern covers. Like that's a cover that we've all seen, but they just slightly different interpretation of it. Still pretty cool. And then they had the one-shots where it weren't really part of the numbering system. And this one came out in 1976 because it was United States bicentennial, so they came out with Captain America Bicentennial Battles. And this one's great, just chock full of Kirby stuff, and the back is always funny. It's Cap and Uncle Sam shaking hands over a 200-year birthday cake, I guess. But it just, I do have a beautiful copy of this one. It's kind of flawless. But I've had this one forever. And then a strange thing happened. I remember when this happened, it was a huge big deal at the time. And I don't know so much now because you have crossovers and stuff. In the 90s, they had all those amalgam books and everything. But when this came out, this was a really big deal. And my copy is pretty well beat up. But I remember when I got it, my dad gave it to me. And it was roughed up when we got it. And, you know, it still is readable, though. It's intact. But it's Superman versus Spider-Man, and it's just a great book. I read the inside of it. The story is kind of silly, and you know, they had to do things to make it so it wouldn't be like a two-panel fight. And they end up, of course, doing what all heroes do. They don't talk when they first meet. They fight, and then they end up teaming together and you know, solving the problem. So after Marvel did that, DC kind of got into the game as well. I never really liked the DC ones as much. They were just kind of, I guess by then too I wasn't as into DC. But I have some of them too. And in DC fashion, you'll see they're only $1. So even back then, they tried to undercut Marvel, I think, price-wise. But, you know, it is what it is. I have two of these. I think one of them is my brother, so I'll have to pull one aside, and when I see him next, I'll make sure he gets his back too. So kind of just was the steward of all collectibles, I guess. And then this one was silly. It's the Super Friends, and it's based on the Saturday morning cartoon. So it's exactly as you would think. It's just a redo of some classic stories. So I remember getting this too. That you were a little disappointed because I was expecting to see stuff going on like it was in the Super Friends cartoon, and it wasn't. These are like old Silver Age stories from DC. And more DC. I don't know. I know I never noticed their numbering system, but it does appear they have C41, C45 on this one, so that's great. I think After Comics, Alan did a video on these, or several videos on these, and I think he has the complete run, so check out his channel if you want to see all of these. I have what I have, I guess. And then DC also did the Christmas issues, which were always big fun for us. Just made it more special when made it more real, I guess, that, you know, it was Christmas outside your window and the superheroes were having Christmas, especially in Marvel because they were in New York City. So growing up in Western New York, it just made it seem all the more real or plausible. And then the last two I got here to show are Battlestar Galactica, which I don't think follows any kind of sequencing number, but this was, you know, television's answer to Star Wars. Pretty good show. I always watched it with my brother, and we liked it. Actually, in a lot of ways, I kind of liked it better than Star Wars. I like Star Wars, but I don't think I'm as devout a follower of Star Wars as a lot of people are. This is the Star Wars movie adaptation. Pretty neat. Oop, almost dropped it. And one thing I did that I noticed is peculiar when I was a kid, and I realized it when I was looking at this one. This is the reprints of the movie adaptation 1 through 3. So I never bothered to buy 1 through 3. My Star Wars collection starts at 4, and then I went back and I started looking at some of these other ones. I used to keep like a little spiral notebook, and I'll bring it in and show it in a future video. But I would count these things, and then further than this, I would count the reprints from the 70s also in my run. So when when I went through and rebagged everything about a year ago, I noticed that there'd be like Marvel Triple Action and books like that in the middle of my Avengers run, and I couldn't figure out why at first, and then I realized, well, that's because if you open it up, it'll say like reprinted from Avengers 77, and then I would have that right next to my Avengers 80. So that's just as a kid what you did, I guess. You know, you were in it for the stories. Um, so it just was a funny little thing I noticed when I did this. So next up, we'll do some interiors. All right, let's look at some of these interiors. So this one is number 2, Spider-Man being number 1. That was always one of my favorite parts here. The Thing transforming into Stan Lee. And he always had his little letter page here, which is kind of neat. His signature, of course, Excelsior. But the first few issues or stories in here are just reprints of the Silver Age, which is cool. But the best story, let me get the old Carmel-looking thing, is the story with Galactus in it. The coming of Galactus. And I remember this is where I learned about where Galactus came from, and the Watcher and Silver Surfer and all that. It's reprints of Fantastic Four 48 through 50. And that was kind of a neat thing too. It's one of those photographic things that they did. Later Kirby did a lot of that, I think, on covers when he went back to DC. But of course the Watcher interferes, and he gets Johnny Storm to go up and get the ultimate nullifier from Galactus' ship, and that's how they defeat him. And I think this is the first appearance of it. Of course, Galactus super pissed at Uatu. But the thing I remember the most about this book is this. It shows inside the Baxter building. I love this thing. I would go over this over and over again, and I remember getting graph paper and drawing my own house that I would want someday, and it had a lot of this same stuff in it. It just was fascinating to me. Pretty cool. And then the next one was this. It's number 9 from 1976, and this one from just beginning to end is just great fight scenes, and you end up with at the end of each one they give you some pretty cool pinups. This one, of course, is Daredevil and Captain America, but they give you these things at the end where they show you pinups. And this, of course, is Thor and Hulk fight, and at the very end they would always tell you which comics these were in. And I can remember looking at this and thinking, wow, someday I'd love to have these comics, and I don't think I have any of these actually, so that would be something neat to have, I guess, all together. And a cool back. Original artwork, really neat. And you got the holiday ones, which are pretty neat, and they usually always start off with, like, here's the Fantastic Four having a snowball fight with some of the Avengers, and it's a neat page too. There's ornaments for each one of them on a tree. It's kind of cool. It's obviously it's an original story. This isn't a reprint from anything, and it's kind of funny, and it kind of segues into after Spider-Man hits the Thing with a big clump of snow. They talk about the time that they teamed up together, and then that segues into the two-parter that was in 2-in-1 and Team Up. I believe, actually no, this isn't that one. This must be one of the earlier stories. I was thinking of the Basilisk story. Then they kind of continue that theme, so there's the continuation of the snowball fight, and then it leads into that story, which I'm sure everyone remembers, in the Avengers. And it just goes on that way. And then again they show the issues that's in. And I have that one, and I have that one. I don't have the others though. The funnier story to me though is the very end. It's the Black Widow and Johnny Blaze, and he goes right up to the roof and he gets hit by a snowball, and it's what ends up being the Champions, I think. And if I remember right, this book came out around that time, so this is shameless marketing, I think, to get you to want to see, geez, what are these heroes going to do together, and buy that book. But the rest of them are pretty cool. This is the bicentennial story, so it's all Jack Kirby stories, and it's cool. And for a kid that, when you're a kid you couldn't get this stuff, so it's always been a cool one too. He was an astronaut apparently on this one. Pretty good interpretation of a mixture of his costume and a real astronaut suit. But it was neat because you could read those old stories without having to get those comics. And I don't know if anyone's ever read this one. I'm sure y'all have, but just some really weird things in this book. And looking back as a kid, it was great. But I read this again the other day when I pulled this, and the stories are just really goofy. They don't make a whole lot of sense. And the cool thing is, I noticed they have different sketches of what the potential covers were going to be, and they were very different from what they ended up with. And I think they talked about proportions, and they wanted to make sure that they had equal size on the cover, so one of the other companies wouldn't probably follow. So it's cool. Back covers, I think, the best image. But and then there's DC's. And this one was great, but one thing I noticed, they had, I went through the stories and it was okay. It's just, kind of weird Silver Age stories. But then one in particular caught my eye that I never remember seeing. And it's a story by Len Wein, and it's penciled by Bernie Wrightson. And it talks about a prowler that's loose, and they still haven't caught him. And of course, it's one of those short stories, so this couple's watching the news, and it's Christmas Eve, and they end up going to bed, and she hears a thump and wakes him up. He goes downstairs and he's got a shotgun. But this expression's great. That's just, Bernie Wrightson was great at capturing facial expression. And you knew in that moment that he must have saw Santa Claus. He goes to bed. It's kind of a nice little story. Never noticed it before, probably because there was no one-man costume in it. So, but that's the interiors. Look at that, I finished the maze. Lucky for me, huh? That's kind of a neat image too. So that's my video on treasuries. I hope you enjoyed it. Until next time, there's that finger. Keep reading.